Fairness, for me, means that we're all in this together.
The Liberal Party of Canada is slowly unveiling their economic platform ahead of the fall election, and in the next few weeks it is expected they will introduce another policy plank which is centered around enticing large pension funds, so potentially the Canada Pension Fund, to invest in infrastructure projects. What would this look like? What could possibly go wrong? For that, we turn to Lorrie Goldstein, Toronto Sun columnist. Lorrie, thank you for being here. So let's start with that. What do you anticipate this looking like?
Well, you raised the first issue, the Canada Pension Plan. That is the biggest pension plan. That's the mother lode of pension plans in Canada. Now, under its current arrangement, the Canada Pension Plan has an independent board that operates at arm's length from the government, whatever the government is, and legislatively, the government cannot interfere in what investments it chooses to make globally. Now, why is that? It's because the purpose of the pension fund isn't to help any government build infrastructure programs when it's run out of money, which is essentially, the Liberals have already spent most of their money if they become the government, so they need something for infrastructure. So the first thing is, all right, wait a minute. Are you going to say that the Canada Pension Plan has to invest on Canadian infrastructure programs? Because that's not good. They should be able to do whatever they want. They've done it. They've done a reasonably good job over the years, and that should stay the same. Okay, that's the first part. Now let's go to all other pension funds. There is a huge pension fund of German municipal workers, or Australian laborers, or Canadian or North American. Okay, fine. So you're saying you're going to entice them to invest in Canadian infrastructure projects. What does that mean? Canadian infrastructure projects don't have the greatest record of being delivered on time and on budget, right? So what are these investors looking for? They're looking for safe, as guaranteed as possible returns, and they want to protect their investors against cost overruns, cost delays, those kinds of things. Okay, so Mr. Trudeau, what are these enticements you're talking about? What specifically are they? Is it going to be, for example, that the Canadian government, meaning taxpayers, will cover any cost overruns, that will guarantee them a certain rate of return, no matter what happens in the project? So that would be the second concern. What exactly are you going to offer to these, then they would become, they'd be Canadian, but mainly, global pension fund. How much are you going to give them so that they will give you money to build these projects that you can't build because you've run out of people's money because it's all being spent on tax cuts?
Infrastructure projects are notoriously unreliable. As you mentioned, cost overruns. It's typically the case that they don't fall within the time frame that they were expected. And so you're right. Would the government backstop these cost overruns? And on what planet can we rely on infrastructure projects to actually make money? Do they make money?
Well, they can. Look, the financing for anything can make money if the business plan makes sense, if the management is competent, and if it's done. So let's not say that this is inevitably a bad thing. But given the record of governments on infrastructure, and in fairness, the Harper Conservatives have started down this road as well. What it's going to mean, too, is that there'll be a lot more privatization of public assets. Anything that governments could build, an airport, a new high-speed train.
That really doesn't sound like a
buses,
bad thing, though.
Highways. If it's done properly and competently. Unfortunately, a lot of these private public partnerships have blown up, have had new costs. So it all depends on how it's done, right? So if they can do it competently, that's great. But let me give you another warning, and this comes from the provincial cousins of the Trudeau Liberals.
No, and I think this provides a good model for us to make sort of a compare and contrast example.
Here's the danger already, and now it goes back to the issue of the independence of the Canada Pension Plan. In Ontario, Kathleen Wynne has announced in a couple of years she's going to have an Ontario pension plan. Anybody who doesn't have some sort of retirement plan, basically meaning most non-unionized workers and companies, will have to contribute to the Ontario pension plan. The idea being that they work 45 years in the workforce, they'll get an Ontario pension as they would a CPP. Okay, now that's going to create, because it's paid for by a 1.9% payroll tax paid by every employee and every employer for every employee, a revenue stream that starts at $3.5 billion a year. And what the Wynne government has already said is that we are going to use some of that money, or we're going to use, well, we don't know how much, to invest in Ontario infrastructure projects and buildings. Okay, so you can see they've already knocked down the firewall that, before they've even started it, they've knocked down this key firewall that says for the Canada Pension Plan, no, the government can't tell the Canada Pension Plan to direct in any particular investment. Again, why? because it's not the job of the pension. The pension plan is supposed to be making money for its investors. If they can do that with any particular investment, great. But the government can't tell them because they may not be getting the... I mean, can you imagine a Canada pension plan or Ontario pension plan that had to invest $3.5 billion a year in Ontario infrastructure projects, which the Ontario government was responsible for, given its record of losing $1 billion on e-health, losing $1 billion on canceled gas plants? It would be frightening, terrifying.
So Ontario is investing in something so risky. Why? Because they need money.
Oh, well, Kathleen Wynne, she's selling off Hydro One, 60% of the major electricity distributors because she needs. So the problem is what they're doing. Having private sector invest in infrastructure isn't a bad or good thing. It's good if it's done well, but it's all being driven by the need for money.
Sure. And
it's both being driven by the need in Ontario and for the federal Liberals. And that's not why you do something like this. You don't do something like this because you're burning the furniture to pay the mortgage on the house. Oh my God, we have no money for infrastructure, right? How can we get it? Oh, we can make sweetheart deals with pension plans. That's not the reason you do it. You do those things properly, and you pay them out of, hopefully, a sensible fiscal plan. The concern is that will these plans be sensible, and will they work, and will the government resist the temptation of forcing the pension money of Ontarians and Canadians to go into projects which it then bungles, and when it bungles, has to pay a huge premium to private sector investors who finance the thing in the first place.
Are you confident that the LPC plan will be sensible?
The federal one?
Yes.
The federal one, what I would say is that if we look at the record of both Liberal and Conservative governments, but let's ignore the Conservative government and go back to the previous Liberal government, right? How many big things did they do that came in, that were capital projects that came in on time and on budget, where there was no patronage, there was no favoritism, there was no awarding stuff to the friends of the government? And I'm not saying that doesn't go on with the Harper Tories either. But it's basically, look, if you're going to do this, you have to run it like a business, because this is too important. This is about the future ability of Canadians to have their pension plans. So you've got to do it right.
And their retirement.
Exactly. So you've got to do this right. I would say that I don't have confidence in governments of any political stripe to do this right.
All right. Well, Lorrie, I think it's time we move out of Ontario, maybe to Saskatchewan.
That may be the last bastion. Like the lifeboats are all out and we're all rowing towards Saskatchewan.
Okay, thank you.